Hello and welcome to the Life at Leyton podcast with me, Sarah Glanville, as your host. Here at Leyton UK, we know our people are more than just their job. The careers of our people are part of their unique lives, and who they are as a whole person is what fundamentally contributes to their success and the success of our business. In the podcast, we'll spend time with one of our exceptional people from across the business. And in each episode we'll look to explore the people behind the job titles, the unique and brilliant stories that make them who they are. In today's episode, I welcome James Marden, our Northern Sales Director, onto the podcast to talk about a very meaningful topic, social mobility. Jimmy has incredible insight into the importance of seeking out and welcoming in talent from diverse socio-economic backgrounds, and the positive impact of hiring this way, not only for businesses, but also for individual people and their families. Jimmy worked within Welfare to Work before joining Leyton, and this experience has hugely impacted his understanding of social mobility and has instilled within him a passion for championing social mobility whilst hiring at Leyton. This is a very interesting conversation about a topic that can be complicated, but Jimmy does a great job of offering practical advice to both employers and job seekers. So thank you for tuning in. Grab yourself a coffee and get ready to be inspired by the people that are Leyton UK. Hello Jimmy, welcome to the Life at Leyton podcast. Thank you for sitting down to talk to me today. How are you?
Good, thanks Sarah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome, it's great to have you on. We've got a really kind of meaty topic to cover today, and I think it would be great if you could start us off by kind of covering a bit of your professional journey and what brought you here to Leyton. I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, sure. Might not be that exciting, but I suppose you could class it as more or less a series of pleasant accidents have led me to this point. So when I left school, I went to university to study social sciences, which was history and sociology, which, and I mean this with the greatest of respect to my fellow graduates at the time, it tends to be one of the courses that you do when you don't really know what you want to do.
Yeah.
I'd figured I'd join the police force, but I didn't count on graduating at peak recession in 2010, middle of a public sector hiring freeze. The degree made me really handy at pub quizzes, but pretty limited in what I could use that info for professionally. So probably add a bit of context. So there I was, finished my degree, working in a supermarket cafe with my wee fancy hairnet and my non-slip safety shoes, figuring out what I wanted to do next. And I got a message from a boss at the time on the work WhatsApp about upselling little pots of jam for the tea cakes. And I realised at that point it maybe wasn't for me, and I needed a wee bit of a change of direction. You know, I enjoy a tea cake, but upselling jam's a slightly different thing. So one day I was sitting in the train home, kind of pondering what I was going to do in my life and thinking about my jam targets, and I overheard a sales manager kind of debriefing his team on the train. It was kind of field sales, door knocking type stuff, and I thought, yeah, I could probably do that, and asked him for a crack at it. Turns out I wasn't too shabby at it. Unfortunately, that turned out to be a bit of a pyramid scheme in disguise. So moved into a slightly more traditional sales stream into recruitment, predominantly focusing on welfare to work, which involved finding opportunities for people kind of furthest from sustainable employment, typically from what you class as disadvantaged backgrounds, deprived areas, or maybe with like long-standing health conditions that were creating barriers to them getting back into the workplace. Alongside that, supporting them to develop skills required to maintain and progress in work, which, as you can imagine, was equal parts challenging, but really, really rewarding when you can help someone realise that actually they can achieve and they can contribute in the way that they want to do. So I did that for half a decade. Got a call one day from a recruiter saying you had this great opportunity in tax. I thought he was joking, but figured out why not. Came in and met the team at Leyton, which at the time I suppose you could describe as one of these big companies you'd never heard of unless you were in the sector. And realised as a BD here, I'd more or less spent most of my time talking to really cool companies inventing really cool stuff every day. So I was fortunate enough to get offered a BD role. Went pretty well. 6.5 years later, still here, slightly different capacity, but been fortunate enough to be part of the incredible growth we've had over the last half decade.
Yeah.
That's kind
That's
of where I am. Yeah.
that is quite a journey. I think it's funny how many times you speak to people who have that same story of just falling into like the next role and they figure their way out. And that's kind of the story of my career journey to Leyton as well. But it's all led you to the right place. We're glad to have you.
Worked out okay in the end. Yeah, still here anyway.
It did.
Yeah.
So how do you feel that your experience working within that welfare to work space has influenced your perspective on career development and hiring practices?
Sure. I suppose before we go on, is this like the Joe Rogan experience where I'm also getting filmed and everybody can see me and that kind of thing, or is it just audio?
Just audio.
Just audio. Well, I suppose then for anybody listening who can't see what I look like, if you can see my picture, I don't know if that's attached to it, you're probably not going to be struck by a beacon of diversity. I'm white, I'm male, I'm approaching middle age, probably class myself as middle class, talking about social mobility. I worked pretty hard to get where I am. Fortunate enough to have a family who really supported me and encouraged me to develop. But working and given, the whole thing is around social mobility, working in welfare to work was a real eye opener for me. I had a lot of opportunities naturally just from where I grew up and my background from birth. Didn't really have to do anything to change that. But what I got to see was just how vicious the cycle of social immobility could be, based purely on where you lived or the opportunities your parents had, to the point where it became almost generational. You used to see parents come in for help to get back into work, and they'd been out of work for 20 years. And then you saw the same kind of pattern emerging with their children who left school, had no plans for employment or further education, and not really through any fault of their own, just hadn't been given any guidance to that point. And when you don't have that kind of support network, things can come crashing down pretty quick. And one of the kind of the biggest takeaways for me was that it made me realize that unconscious bias is very, very real and very, very dangerous in business, to the point where we can become inadvertently guilty of looking for carbon copies of the last successful person, to the ultimate detriment of everyone, I suppose. I saw some of the most talented people you'll ever meet get turned down time and time again based on everything from an accent to their postcode on a CV. Now back then when I was doing that, now these are all big no-nos in recruitment, but back then I remember getting feedback from employers, really, really blunt things like, I didn't like their accent, or they live in this part of town, can't possibly hire them. So I get it, it's human nature to make a snap judgment. We can't stop it, but we can be really, really conscious of it. And what it really did is just make it really evident how inaccessible certain career paths, I suppose, were for loads of groups within society. When businesses are guilty of professional exclusion, you miss out on a huge pool of tremendously talented people from diverse backgrounds, and then the diversity of thought that comes with that. It doesn't only stunt business growth, but it has a massive impact on wider economy as well, making socio-economic mobility virtually impossible for so many people. And when you think about social mobility as a concept, for most people would think it's simply it's a matter of fairness. People should be rewarded in life based on your merit, what you do, your actions, all that kind of stuff. But the consequences of it entrenching that inequality is really, really clear. If it's harder for people to change their economic circumstances, then it's equally hard for people to improve their living standards. It's more likely they're going to suffer broader negative effects on their health and well-being, and that adds pressure everywhere else, and the cycle just keeps going round and round. It's I think that's why work is so important from that perspective. It becomes your identity. Like Sarah, when you're at a party and you're meeting new people, what's one of the first things you ask or get asked?
Well, I'm a recruiter, so I always ask what
you'll ask straight away.
what their
asking
job
the wrong
is.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, it's pretty common. You say, "What do you do for a living?"
Yeah.
We maybe don't realize it, but we judge people on this. You rank them against yourself. They rank you against them. But when you take it into the context of hiring for a company, you need to be hyper conscious of ditching the socially constructed preconceptions that you have, and recognizing that talent can be hidden in so many places. With when so much of a person's worth is attached to the contribution they make to society, it's something that we need to be kind of hyper vigilant on, I suppose, in terms of the opportunities that we can present, and making sure that we aim not to attach that bias just based on, as I said, anything from your accent, what part of town you grew up in, your racial background, all those other characteristics, and it's just being conscious.
Absolutely. I mean, we can only capitalize on the opportunities that we are given. And if we are not given the opportunity to contribute, to develop ourselves, to showcase the talent that we have, then, we're never going to be in a position to elevate our standing socially.
Exactly. It's kind of one of those things where, a lot of emphasis on it. I do believe in this as well. You've got to be accountable for yourself, and you need to work to make things happen. But as an industry, as whatever industry you're talking about, how accessible do we make that in the first place, to allow people to really grow?
Yeah. You're in a position now as a hiring manager, and everyone who's in a position to make hiring decisions, a lot of power sits with you to make fair decisions, like you've said, and to equally offer opportunities to people, to give them the opportunity to drive and to thrive, I suppose, in their lives and in their careers. So within talent acquisition at Leyton, we are strategically trying to create a more inclusive and unbiased hiring process to increase opportunities for individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds. What do we need to do to actually make this possible, and not just a strategy or not just an idea that we want to carry out?
Sure. I mean, I suppose it's quite a big question, and I guess you kind of touched on it there just in what we were talking about before. As a hiring manager, and there's lots of us at Leyton, you can kind of almost take for granted the responsibility that sits with that. You don't always comprehend what that opportunity means to that person, because ultimately, we are, at the end of the day, we're a business. We're looking for the best possible people to deliver on a specific remit or role or function, or whatever that is. And you can kind of forget the wider impact of what that process looks like. So for me, I suppose the kind of key thing is, embracing CSR fully and taking it seriously. And I don't mean just the bits that we like. So, CSR initiatives broken down into, in categories like environmental, philanthropic, ethical, and economic responsibility. The environmental and philanthropic stuff tends to be the ones that will get the most attention. Our impact on the planet, massive topic just now everywhere. And the moral obligations that we have to commit to and contribute to worthy causes, whether that's nationally, locally, globally, whatever that is, that even though they may not relate to a business, but just as important in my mind as our socio-economic obligations, which, as I said, we can get taken for granted. We pay well as a business, and that's okay. But how much emphasis is often put on the opportunity for people to move forward, and actually what difference does that make to their life? How much of a part of that can we play? And that's not just beneficial for the candidate or the employee, but for us as a business. If we take time and dedicate resource to identifying, okay, what is the overall ambition of our people? How can we facilitate that? Is it feasible? Of course, it needs to be feasible for the business, but if we can get that right, arguably has one of the biggest impacts both to ourselves as a company, the candidate themselves as a person, that person's family, their local economy, the wider economy off the back of that, health service, all of these things that kind of run out into the back of that. And I think, from that perspective, there's probably a few things we can do to promote that. Everything from gathering data on our work, obviously anonymous data on our workforce, to get to know the backgrounds and all the diversity that sits within that, because actually a lot of businesses don't have a clear picture of what that looks like. They may make assumptions, but it's maybe never been measured. Engage earlier, young people, and at schools. I'll talk about it a little bit later. broaden the talent pool. I know it's something that we massively focus on at Leyton just now, trying to bring in talent from as many wide-ranging backgrounds as we possibly can, to get that diversity of thought and influence new ideas. Better upskilling opportunities, again, something I think that the L&D team are really, really good at here. Shout out to some of my colleagues over there. We spend a huge amount of time giving people the chance to develop in their own roles or transition into different roles, whatever that may look like. And then most importantly, have inclusive leaders in place. I think, everything, the buck ultimately stops with us, whatever function you sit in. If the person that's sitting there isn't embracing this, then that has a bit of a ripple effect down into the teams, and then knock-on impact into the wider business and all the stuff that comes along with that.
Yeah, and I think something that's becoming quite clear through this conversation, Jimmy, is how good your understanding is of why this is so important. And I think that that's something that is a real blessing for this part of the business that has your eyes on it, and is something that is, as part of our strategic objectives within talent acquisition, is to educate the leadership team and educate the wider business on why this is so important, that we focus on social mobility and we focus on offering opportunities to people who maybe don't always get the opportunity within the industries that we operate within, because there is so much value to it. And the wider business as well, we talk about gathering data, and data is always our best friend. We need everyone to buy into that, don't we? We need people to contribute their data for us to be able to use it. So I think it is that education piece where we sit, and people like yourself within the business who do have a good understanding on why this is so important, is that we continue to talk about it. And I think that's how we make this a real thing.
Yeah, it's that it's the understanding part that's critical, and it's not just for the people that we look to bring in, but from the people that are already here. You can ask people to complete various metrics on an HR platform and all the rest of it, but if we're not as effective as we could be at providing the context as to why that's important and what that means, and what's that used for, and it literally, it's embedded, and it should be embedded and intertwined with every aspect of the business, whatever that is. You can link this topic to everything from hiring and retention through to performance in some way or another. So it's really, really important that we get that educational part right and talk about it all the time. Should always be part of the conversation.
Completely agree. You mentioned part of the strategy to be engaging with young people, and I guess I'm interested in your perspective on how we actually get young people from any background excited about the opportunities that are available to them outside of traditional careers, which tends to be where most people focus their ideas of what their future might look like.
Yeah, so for me, this one is probably, it is a big topic, and there's lots of pitfalls and all that kind of stuff. But this one is really simple for me. We need to engage earlier, and give a bit of confidence. Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What was your career advisor like at school?
Oh, I don't even know if I really had one.
Exactly. Well, I never.
Yeah.
I'd say that's a fairly typical response. I never met mine.
Yeah.
I'm sure we had one, but I never had the opportunity to talk to them. But my guidance teacher told me, word for word, if I didn't get an A-level in maths and English, I'd fail in life. Literally word for word, which at 16, 17 is super unhelpful advice. No one had really kind of opened my eyes to what was possible, and you end up with this ceiling placed on you about what you can achieve in life. Never had any engagement from local or national businesses at school. Nothing, absolutely nothing. I had family who were very successful in business and various aspects, but I don't know if maybe a generational thing. Money was always a bit of a taboo topic, kind of uncouth to talk about. You never really asked. And maybe just my family, I don't know if we were a bit weird, but the result was that I came away from education wanting that success, wanting that pathway, but had precisely no idea how to get there. Nobody's ever showed me. I'm obviously working in sales now from a commercial angle. Like that, sales in general is never You go to school, no teacher or anybody's going to come up and say, have you ever considered a career in sales? It's always kind of, nobody really kind of understands what it takes to kind of do well. It's just seen as something a bit different. So in my mind, from a recruitment process and how we get this right, we need to take a step back even further from the traditional process where we're first meeting people or engaging people when they're already in their careers, and engage at source with local authorities and schools and any number of the great organisations that are out there whose sole purpose it is to help people transition from secondary education into career pathways or further education, whatever that looks like. And I think if we can get that right, we capture talent much earlier. Whether that results in us as a sector or a business ourselves taking on board that talent, or whether they decide on a completely different path, but that simple, quick conversation with one young person could change the entire direction of what they choose to do with their life, and prevent them potentially entering that cycle of social immobility where your future goals are ultimately shaped by the people who are around you, which, depending on where you live or where you come from, for example, may mean that actually you're a bit trapped and you can't get out of it. So really, really important, engage early, get as involved as we can, and offer that sort of mentorship into professional life.
Yeah, completely. It's seeing the opportunity in building a relationship with talent. And that's something we're doing here at Leyton, is sort of trying to see the longevity in building relationships with people who could be a candidate at some point in time. And I think that that's exactly what you're talking about doing, but actively getting in front of people at a much earlier stage in their development, and while they're still in education, I think is really valuable.
Yeah, of course. I think that we've got to take accountability for that, because a lot of these organisations approach business and they look for opportunity, but very little usually comes back from the other way. We need to proactively go to these places, whether it's schools, universities, colleges, whatever that looks like, job centres, anything, anywhere where you're likely to find groups of very, very talented people without a bit of direction, and maybe just need a little bit of a handhold to get them started. Can turn out to be some of the most loyal and productive employees you could ever wish for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have a bit of natural resilience embedded.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I like talk about my school. Like, I went to a school in a deprived area, actually, and you're talking about the opportunities. I don't think we ever had anyone come in from any business, like you've said, into our school and talk to people. I look at people that I went to school with, and they probably could have changed the trajectory of their career, having options that weren't just doctors and teachers and all this sort of stuff that do require a level of further education to achieve that. Whereas, if we were to be able to go into schools and talk about something meaningful like a career in sales, that maybe the barrier to entry actually doesn't need to be as high, but we have exceptional people who would be fantastic at building relationships and understanding problems within a business and being able to sell back solutions like that. There's real soft skills there that don't require formal education that we can mold into great salespeople.
It's that preconception that you need to have ticked a box. I went and did a degree because I felt I had to.
Yeah.
In reality, did I need it? No, I didn't. I could have, probably could have been further ahead in my career path if I'd just decided, actually, I'm not going to bother with my history degree. And I'm not, by no means, I'm not recommending people drop out of education, all that kind of stuff. But for me personally, it was always, you either need to be a doctor, a lawyer, teacher, pilot, very traditional routes. That was the only thing that ever got discussed. And education is kind of geared towards that. And never even like skilled trades was never discussed at school, ever. It was, you need to do these paths or that's it, you're done, type thing. And you kind of, if you force people to fit into a certain mold, then you just get thousands and thousands of carbon copies of the same skill set, same mindset, same attitude. But if we can accept that actually, everybody's different, everybody's good at very different things, and you embrace that and you look for that in your hiring processes, then you create a culture where actually I'm looking for attitude. I can teach the rest. If you're willing to put the effort in to the role, then I'll put the effort into you to make sure you're successful at it. And sometimes it's just that little somebody willing to take the time to go and do that at an earlier stage. And I think we could have a very different workforce if we get it right.
Yeah, I agree. So taking it back a little bit, how do we actually give access to people and break down the barrier or preconception of what is required to be successful in this environment?
Sure. So obviously we kind of cross a few different sectors, if you like, here, financial services, tax, accountancy, sales, all that kind of stuff. When you combine all of them together, they're probably some of the most intimidating career paths on face value to enter. Typically very male dominated, university educated. There is a preconception that you need to be a chartered accountant or all these things to make an entry point into the industry. But the reality is, whatever your background, if you don't see people who look and sound like you thriving in an industry, it can be really hard to even consider that it'll be possible for you either. So while diversity and inclusion of awareness is rightly been increasingly in the spotlight over recent years, it's fair to ask if socio-economic differences or class, for lack of a better word, how it used to be termed, is still somewhat prevalent in decision-making processes. So to break down the barriers and preconceptions, we need to really shout louder about our success stories in the wider market. I don't know if it's a British thing about maybe being a bit too modest to shout about your achievements, but it's really easy to fall into the trap of looking at someone in a professional position and just thinking, well, that's kind of out of reach for me, and then you never really try. And the reality can be very different and much more accessible than you think. For me, it was I talked about family members having good success in business. My grandfather was president of a very large food manufacturer in Europe, and I never asked. I just figured, he's very different to me. I could never get to that point and all that. And then at the time, I thought this is just inaccessible, and I just had no idea, and I should have just asked him, but I didn't because it wasn't the done thing. And I think if we can just get a bit more comfortable at highlighting, actually, not everybody that is the managing director of a company or the sales director of this function or the director of consulting has come from this preconceived idea of what we might think they have, and just being a bit clearer, actually, this is a lot, maybe a much more straightforward path than we think it is. Paint the picture.
Yeah. So what advice would you have for young people who are unsure about their career direction, especially those who feel like they might not have a clear career path or opportunities to be successful?
Yeah, I think from this perspective, I think the first step is recognizing that navigating a career choice can be challenging, especially when you feel a bit uncertain about where you want to go. It's normal to feel uncertain. It's going to take time to find the right path. Be a bit more patient with yourself, and recognizing the whole thing's a bit of a process. It's okay not to have everything figured out immediately. Took me I mentioned I went to university. Probably, I'm sitting here talking about taking it a step further back. I probably should have mentioned that I didn't particularly enjoy school. I got a 26% attendance rate in my GCSE year, that sort of thing. It just I was all right at it. It just wasn't really my thing. I didn't really enjoy it that much. So it took me a little bit longer to get to where I want to go. And at the time, I remember feeling like such a failure. And then, actually, life's worked out all right. Just things happen when they're meant to happen, as long as you put the work in. And, so many successful people have followed non-linear paths to reach their desired careers. And it's really important that, be curious about what you want to do, proactive, and embrace those opportunities as you go. When you're young, it's kind of okay to take risks until you figure it out. You may have your parents saying, "Oh, what are you going to do at university?" All the rest of it, blah 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 blah. Set yourself some goals, of course, but explore your interests. Speak to as many people as you possibly can from as many different industries and fields as you can. Reflect on your values and priorities. I think personal values have become much more important in today's world. We talk about the CSR stuff. Everybody's got something that they're rightfully passionate about, but how does that tie in with what kind of lifestyle do you envision for yourself? What aspects of a job are most important to you, and kind of understanding, where your values are, and can help you make decisions that align with your personal and eventual professional goals. But I suppose the important thing is, the kind of one takeaway is be patient. There's so much pressure on young people to get it right first time round. It's okay just to take a breather and ask questions. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, I love that, and it's so true. I also think about the span of a career, like you mentioned. Obviously, we were talking about the start of your career journey being in retail and in your cafe, and then you've obviously had a career in recruitment space, specifically within welfare to work, and now you're within commercial sales. We all have probably multiple careers these days. Like, you'll have a trajectory within a business or within an industry, and then that will slightly change. And it's like what you've said, just don't be afraid to try things and for it not to be perfect. And
Yep.
I think there's a quote that I love that's like, failure is feedback is knowledge, and knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
So you just continually look to put yourself in situations where you try things and might not be quite right, but you'll learn something from it, and that will direct you to where you need to be and where your strengths lie.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. I think thinking back to when I first kind of left education and started going into work and making more money and all that kind of stuff, at the time, when you're doing it, time feels like it moves so slowly. When you're like, this is going to be it. This is going to be my life forever. And actually, looking back now, it was like a blink of an eye in the grand scheme of things. You've got 40 years
Mm-hmm.
of work ahead of you. You don't need to have everything figured out in the first 10 minutes of leaving school. And I think that's, we need to get away from that. People, you need to make mistakes. You need to understand, okay, this is what I enjoy, this is what I don't. Now we can't all live in a fantasy land, obviously, where you do exactly what you love, because sometimes it's just not practical. That's okay. But in the grand scheme of things, it's all right. Make a mistake, go. But and it's easier said than done about asking questions. As a 17, 18-year-old, I probably wouldn't have done at the time. But then that's where we come in, where guys like yourself and TA, myself as a hiring manager, my colleagues they're also hiring managers. If they're not going to come to us with the questions, we need to go to them and start asking the questions of them and get them to think about it, give them a bit of confidence, and small starting point, but make a big difference.
Completely. I've loved this episode. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Thanks for joining me and for
Thanks for having me.
Such an open conversation. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we sign off the podcast today?
No, just remember, it's okay to make mistakes.
I think that's the perfect place to end it. Thank you again, Jimmy, and thanks to everyone for listening along at home. I hope you all enjoyed that chat as much as I did. We're going to be back in a few weeks' time with our next episode. But until then, if you are one of the members in our talent community and you're interested in finding out more about what the future might look like at Leyton, please reach out to one of us here in the talent acquisition team. I'll put my contact details in the description below, or check out our careers page for the roles that we have live currently. We'll be back in a few weeks. Thanks again, Jimmy, for sharing your story, and thank you all for listening in. This has been the Life at Leyton podcast.